All right, ready to get into some serious AI stuff.
Always up for that.
But not the usual robot takeover thing we see in the movies. This is about how AI could totally transform Africa. You sent over that African Union Continental AI strategy document.
Yeah.
Quite a read. It's like their game plan for making sure AI is a good thing, for the continent.
Yeah, what's really fascinating about it to me is that it's not just about the technology itself. It's really a very human-centered strategy.
Hmm.
It's all about making sure that this powerful AI benefits everyone in Africa, especially those who are often left behind.
Okay, so no like Terminator situation then.
Not if the African Union has anything to say about it.
Good to hear. But honestly, when I hear AI in Africa, like my first question is,
Yeah.
how much of a difference can this tech really make for their economy?
Yeah, that's a good question. The projections are actually pretty amazing. PricewaterhouseCoopers estimates that AI could add something like $1.5 trillion dollars
Mm.
to Africa's economy by 2030. We're talking 6% of the entire continent's GDP. And McKinsey, they think that generative AI alone
Mm.
could boost the global economy by trillions every year. So
Yeah.
if Africa can get even a small slice of that, we're talking about some serious economic growth.
1.5 trillion. Okay, I'm definitely interested now. But is Africa even in a position to make that happen? Like, what's the AI scene even like over there right now?
Well, there's actually a lot going on already. The Center for Intellectual Property and Information Technology Law, they found over 2,400 AI organizations across Africa. And a big chunk of those are startups.
Hmm.
And we're even seeing more and more contributions from African developers
Yeah.
on platforms like GitHub.
Okay, that's good to hear. But I'm guessing it's not all, easy going. What are some of the challenges that Africa faces in this AI, I guess, race?
Well, one of the biggest ones is this thing called the AI divide. Compared to the US, China, or the EU, Africa's contribution to the global AI economy is still relatively small. There are gaps,
Mm.
you know,
Mhm.
in infrastructure, data, and the specialized skills that you need to make AI work.
So they've got this huge potential, but also like some serious hurdles to overcome. So that's where this African Union strategy comes in, right?
Exactly. The Continental AI strategy is really all about tackling those challenges head on.
So paint me a picture then. What kind of AI-powered future is the African Union trying to create?
Well, their vision is really ambitious. They want to see an Africa where AI fuels inclusive growth,
Hmm.
empowers people and strengthens their position on the global stage. But what's really key here, I think, is that they're calling for an AI that is African-centric, an AI that respects their values and priorities.
That's really interesting. It's not just about adopting AI, it's about adapting it to Africa, right? Like I'm sensing this local first approach is a big theme here.
Absolutely. And it aligns perfectly with Agenda 2063, which is the AU's kind of grand plan for transforming Africa
Yeah.
into a global powerhouse. So this AL strategy is really a key piece of that larger puzzle.
Okay, so we've got the big picture, but let's zoom in a little bit. What are the specific areas that they're focusing on to make this vision a reality?
Well, the strategy has like 5 main focus areas. First, maximizing the benefits of AI. They want to use AI to create jobs, improve lives, enhance public services, and really drive progress in key sectors like healthcare, agriculture, and education.
Right, that makes sense. But like with any powerful tool, there's always a flip side. How does the strategy address the potential downsides of AI?
Well, that's actually their second focus area,
Yeah.
minimizing risk. They're very aware of the potential for harm, things like bias, discrimination, job displacement, and threats to privacy. What really stood out to me is their commitment to protecting not just data privacy, but also cultural heritage and indigenous knowledge, things that are really at the heart of African identity.
Yeah, it's encouraging that they're thinking about those long-term impacts for sure. But how do they actually plan to build Africa's AI capabilities? We're talking data centers, skilled workers. That's not an overnight thing.
Yeah, no, it's a huge undertaking. That's their third focus area, building capabilities. This is all about investing in data infrastructure, training data scientists, and making sure that Africa has the computing power and the expertise to develop their own AI solutions, not just import them from other places.
Sounds like a massive undertaking. Is the African Union going at this alone, or are they looking for partners?
Well, collaboration is really key, both within Africa and internationally. That's actually the fourth focus area of the strategy, fostering cooperation. The idea is to pool resources, share expertise, and learn from each other's successes and failures.
Makes sense. I bet none of this is cheap, though. What about the money side of things?
You guessed it. The fifth focus area is all about accelerating investment. They're calling for both public and private sector funding to drive AI innovation and adoption across the continent. They recognize that to make this happen, It's going to require a serious commitment of resources.
Okay, so 5 key areas: maximizing benefits, minimizing risks, building capabilities, fostering cooperation, and attracting investment. It's a pretty, holistic approach. But let's get down to brass tacks. How might AI actually be used to tackle some of the specific challenges that Africa is facing? Let's start with agriculture.
Okay, well, AI could completely revolutionize how Africa farms. Imagine using AI to do things like precision farming, using data to optimize crop yields, or even predicting weather patterns to help farmers plan for droughts or floods. This could have a huge impact on food security across the continent.
Yeah, it's like taking ancient knowledge and blending it with cutting edge tech. What about healthcare? AI seems like it could be incredibly valuable there.
Oh, absolutely. We're already seeing AI being used for things like diagnosing diseases, figuring out the best treatments, and even speeding up drug discovery. Think about AI analyzing medical images, or identifying potential outbreaks before they become really serious, or even personalizing treatment plans based on a patient's unique data.
Wow, it's like having a high-tech, medical consultant available to everyone. What about education? How can AI be used to improve learning for students in Africa?
Well, AI has the potential to personalize education, tailoring the learning experience to each student's needs and abilities. It can also help teachers by automating things like grading, which frees up more of their time to actually teach.
So AI tutors and robot teachers assistants. Okay, that's a pretty cool image. But let's be real for a second. The strategy must acknowledge that there are potential downsides to all of this, right?
Oh, definitely. One major concern is that AI could actually make existing inequalities even worse.
Hmm.
If access to these technologies isn't equitable, it could really widen the gap between those who have and those who don't. That's why the strategy is so focused on inclusive development.
That's a really crucial point. And beyond those social issues, like building the physical infrastructure for this, the data centers, the networks, that's got to be a huge hurdle too, right?
It really is. The strategy calls for really significant investment in data infrastructure. And it's not just about the hardware. It's about establishing solid data governance frameworks and making sure there's access to good quality data.
So it's not just about having data, it's about having the right data
Mm.
and then also knowing how to manage it responsibly. But even with all the infrastructure in the world, you need people who know how to use it right. What about this skills gap? How do they plan to address that?
Well, they really emphasize developing AI talent across the continent. It's not just about training data scientists. They're talking about integrating AI education into the entire curriculum, from primary school all the way to higher education and vocational training. They even mentioned this program called the African Masters in Machine Intelligence.
So it's a long-term vision, getting people ready for this AI-powered future, like right from the start. But I'm curious, with all this focus on, local development, what role do they see for international cooperation?
Well, international cooperation is absolutely crucial. The strategy recognizes that Africa can learn a lot from the rest of the world in terms of knowledge sharing, resources, and figuring out how to deal with the ethical side of AI.
So learning from others, but also making sure Africa's at the table, right? When it comes to setting the global rules for AI.
Exactly. One thing they really highlight is the need to strengthen Africa's participation in those global AI forums. Right now, a lot of the big discussions are happening in places like the UN, but African countries often face challenges in participating, whether it's travel costs, lack of information, or capacity gaps. The strategy wants to overcome those barriers and make sure that Africa has a voice in shaping the global AI landscape.
So it's like they're saying, we're not going to be passive observers in this AI revolution. We're going to be active shapers of it.
That's a great way to put it. And it's not just talk. They're proposing some really concrete actions, like developing national AI strategies, pushing for investment in data infrastructure, and even training African diplomats and policymakers to engage effectively in those global AI discussions.
Wow. Okay. It's pretty remarkable how much thought and detail they've put into this strategy.
They really have. And it's not just a top-down approach. They really emphasize the importance of involving everyone, businesses, civil society, and most importantly, the African people themselves.
That's so important. After all, this is about building an AI future that works for everyone, right? Not just a select few.
Exactly. And there's something really hopeful about that. This strategy is so deeply rooted in a vision of AI for good, an AI that can be a force for positive change and a more just and sustainable world.
It's definitely inspiring to see them, not shying away from the complexities, both the challenges and the incredible potential. But honestly, with the vision this ambitious, it's hard not to wonder, what are some of the bumps they might hit along the way?
Well, that's a great question. And it leads us to some of the potential pitfalls and roadblocks that the strategy itself acknowledges. One of the biggest, you know, challenges is that digital divide we talked about a bit earlier. Access to technology
Yeah.
and digital literacy. It's so uneven across the continent. It's really hard to see how AI can benefit everyone equally if they can't bridge that gap.
So it's not just about like rolling out the tech, right? It's making sure everyone can actually use it and participate. But even if they solve that problem, holding on to skilled people is tough.
Hmm.
The strategy talks about training AI talent, but won't those folks just get like snatched up by companies in other parts of the world?
That's a real risk. And the strategy does acknowledge that. They're not naive to the global competition for this kind of talent. But their plan involves more than just training people. It's about creating the kind of environment in Africa where AI professionals want to stay and build their careers.
So yeah, competitive salaries and all that, but also things like cutting-edge research facilities,
Hmm.
opportunities to collaborate with other, really smart people, making it the place to be for AI.
Exactly. And let's not forget data itself. We talked about data centers and infrastructure, but the strategy goes deep into data governance. They're really hammering home the point that data needs to be handled responsibly and ethically.
You're right, it's not just about having data, it's about using it the right way, protecting privacy, respecting cultural sensitivities, and making sure it doesn't, make existing biases worse. It's a lot to think about.
It is. But what's encouraging to me is that they're clearly aware of these complexities. They're not just blindly pushing for AI adoption. They're really thinking through the implications. Take, for example, their focus on protecting indigenous knowledge.
So,
That's not something you see in every AI strategy document.
no, definitely not. It really shows how they're trying to, integrate AI into African society in a way that respects, their values and traditions. But beyond those broader challenges, what are some concrete ways that the strategy proposes to turn this vision into reality? Like, what's on the to-do list?
Well, the first step is for each African nation to come up with its own national AI strategy, kind of like a localized version of the Continental Plan.
So a shared vision, but with each country adapting it to their own situation.
Exactly. And the Continental strategy acts as a guide, providing a framework and sharing best practices to help each country create their own roadmaps.
Okay, so national plans are in place. What's next?
Well, a big focus is obviously building those AI capabilities we talked about.
Yeah.
That means investing in data infrastructure, like those data centers and high-performance computing, but also, and this is key, developing a skilled workforce.
Right, back to education and training.
Right. Absolutely. And they're proposing a very comprehensive approach, integrating AI into school curriculums from a young age, creating specialized training programs, promoting lifelong learning opportunities, the whole 9 yards.
It's impressive how they're thinking about this across generations, not just focusing on, today's workforce. But what about, pushing the boundaries of AI itself? Are they doing anything to encourage cutting-edge research and innovation?
They are. The strategy emphasizes the need for Africa to become a hub for AI research and development. So that means setting up research centers, funding innovative projects, and fostering collaboration between universities, private companies, and government institutions.
So, building a whole ecosystem for AI innovation, not just relying on what's developed elsewhere.
Exactly. And what's really interesting is their focus on applied AI, developing solutions that directly tackle Africa's challenges. We're talking about things like improving healthcare, boosting agricultural productivity, and driving sustainable economic growth.
So it's like they're saying, we're not just going to be consumers of AI, we're going to be creators and innovators.
Exactly. And they've set some pretty ambitious timelines for putting all of this into action, which shows, I think, a real sense of urgency. They know that this AI revolution is happening now, and they want Africa to be at the forefront.
This is all starting to sound pretty remarkable, but I got to ask the tough question. With all this ambition, are there any blind spots? Are they overlooking anything?
Well, there are definitely some potential pitfalls to watch out for. One of the biggest ones is the funding challenge. All of this, the infrastructure, the education, the research, it requires a massive investment. Yeah. And while the strategy calls for both public and private sector funding, actually mobilizing those resources is going to be a major hurdle.
It always comes down to money, doesn't it? But beyond the money, are there other challenges?
Attracting and keeping that top-tier AI talent we talked about, that's a big one. The competition is fierce. And Africa needs to make sure it can not only train these experts, but also offer them fulfilling and impactful careers that will make them want to stay.
So building that, vibrant AI ecosystem, it's about more than just, fancy labs and equipment. It's got to be about creating a culture of innovation and collaboration where
Hmm.
people feel like they're actually making a difference.
Absolutely. And then there's the data question again. Investing in data infrastructure is one thing, but ensuring good data governance is a whole other challenge. There needs to be clear regulations and ethical guidelines to make sure that data is collected and used responsibly, protecting privacy and preventing harm.
Right, data is like the fuel for AI, so getting that part right is absolutely crucial. But beyond those like practical challenges, are there any broader concerns or criticisms of the strategy itself?
Yeah, there have been some concerns raised about the potential for AI to be used for, like, surveillance and control, particularly by governments. It's a valid concern and something that needs to be very carefully considered.
It's a good reminder that any powerful technology can be used for good or bad, and that oversight and accountability are essential.
Exactly. And that's why the strategy really emphasizes the importance of developing AI in a way that respects human rights and democratic values. They're calling for clear ethical guidelines and regulations to make sure that AI is used responsibly and transparently.
Well, that's reassuring, but even with those safeguards in place, it's hard to predict all the consequences of such a transformative technology, right?
That's true. AI is still evolving so rapidly, and there will undoubtedly be unforeseen challenges and ethical dilemmas. But the fact that the African Union is proactively addressing these issues is a positive sign.
It shows they're not just, jumping on the AI bandwagon. They're thinking critically about the implications and really trying to shape this technology in a way that benefits their continent.
Exactly. And this proactive approach is one of the things that makes the Continental AI strategy so interesting. It's not just a reactive document. It's a forward-looking vision for how AI can be harnessed to create a better future for Africa.
Yeah, it's inspiring to see them taking control of their own narrative and shaping their own destiny in this age of AI. But I think it's important to remember that this is a long game, right? Implementing the strategy is going to be a marathon, not a sprint.
That's absolutely right. There will be setbacks. There will be adjustments needed along the way. But what's important is that they've set the wheels in motion. They've articulated a clear vision and laid out a plan for action.
That's a huge accomplishment in itself. But before we get too carried away with, the excitement of this vision, I think it's crucial to step back and ask, how will we actually know if this strategy is successful? What are the benchmarks for measuring progress?
That's a key question. And thankfully, the strategy has some answers. It includes a whole section on monitoring and evaluation.
So they're not just setting goals, they're also figuring out how to actually track their progress. What kind of metrics are they looking at?
They've identified a range of indicators to measure the impact of the strategy. Things like the number of AI startups that emerge, the amount of investment in AI research and development, and the adoption of AI solutions in key sectors, like healthcare and agriculture.
So they're taking like a data-driven approach
Yeah,
to measuring their own success, which is pretty fitting for an AI strategy.
exactly. And they're not just tracking numbers. They also emphasize the importance of qualitative assessments, gathering feedback from stakeholders on the ground to understand the real-world impact of the strategy.
Yeah, it's that combination of quantitative and qualitative data that
Yeah,
will give them the most accurate picture, right?
absolutely.
Well,
And they're committed to being transparent about their findings, sharing both the successes and the challenges.
yeah, transparency is crucial for building trust. It shows that they're serious about making this work and that they're willing to learn and adapt along the way.
And it also sets a great example for other countries and regions that are grappling with, these same challenges and opportunities with AI. Africa's approach to developing a responsible and inclusive AI strategy is something the whole world can learn from.
It's inspiring to see them leading the way, for sure. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I think it's worth asking, what are the broader implications of this strategy, not just for Africa, but for the world?
That's a fascinating question,
Yeah.
and it opens up a whole new dimension to this discussion.
What's so interesting to me about this Continental AI strategy is that it's not just a plan for Africa, right? It
Yeah,
feels like a blueprint for how any country or any region could approach AI ethically and responsibly in a way that actually benefits people.
I totally agree. That emphasis on putting people first, that was one of the biggest takeaways for me. It's not about AI for AI's sake. It's about using AI to solve real problems and improve people's lives and create opportunities. That's a message that everyone needs to hear, not just in Africa.
Yeah, it's refreshing. Because, we hear so much hype around AI. It's always about the latest gadget or algorithm. But this strategy, it's grounded in, real world needs and aspirations.
Exactly. And it reminds us that AI isn't just a technical challenge, it's a societal one.
Mm.
We have to think about the ethical implications, the potential impact on jobs and inequality, and how we can make sure that everyone benefits from this technology.
Right. Especially like how the strategy emphasizes the importance of local context. They're not saying that there's one right way to do AI. They're encouraging each nation to develop its own approach, one that takes into account its own culture and priorities.
Yeah, that's so important. We can't just assume that something that works in Silicon Valley is automatically going to work everywhere else. AI has to be adapted to different contexts. And that means understanding and respecting different perspectives.
I also think the rest of the world can learn a lot from how the strategy focuses on collaboration, both within Africa and internationally. We need to be sharing knowledge, pooling resources, and working together to tackle the challenges that AI presents.
Absolutely. AI is not a zero-sum game. It's an opportunity for us to collaborate and learn from each other. And that includes learning from different approaches. Africa's emphasis on ethical AI, protecting cultural heritage, making sure that everyone benefits. Those are really valuable insights for the whole world.
It's like they're saying, we're not just playing catch up, we have something unique to offer.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important for Africa. To be a part of these global conversations about AI, they need to have a seat at the table when decisions are being made about the future of this technology.
Because at the end of the day, the future of AI depends on all of us, right? It depends on the values and priorities that we all decide to embrace.
I couldn't agree more. The more diverse those voices are, the better. The Continental AI strategy is a really powerful example of how one region is thinking proactively about its AI future. But it's also a call to action for the rest of the world to do the same.
Yeah, because this isn't just about Africa. This is about the future of humanity. And if we can learn from each other and collaborate and put people at the center of it all, I really believe we can create a future where this technology benefits everyone.
Well said. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. What role will you play in shaping the AI future?
That's a great question. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by how big and complicated AI is, but the truth is, we all have a part to play in making sure it's used for good. Whether it's just staying informed, engaging in conversations about ethics, or supporting organizations working to make AI more inclusive, there are so many ways to get involved.
The future of AI isn't set in stone. It's something we're creating together. The more engaged and informed we are, the better that future will be.
Well, I know this deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about. It's been fascinating to explore this vision for AI in Africa. I'm really excited to see what happens next.
Me too. This is just the beginning of the story.
Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.